I should read you is this on? It is. Okay, I should read you my scenario overview. Cyber-enabled influence operations. So we have a great panel. In fact, we had such a great discussion in the room that you guys are actually going to get second best. But what I'm going to do is see if we have time for 2 questions, and then leave some time for questions from the audience, if that works. So what I'd like to do is go down the row and ask people to say where they think we are and what they think the issues are that they have to deal with. And then if we have time, we'll get to a second question is, okay, so what do we do? What are the responsibilities of the platform providers when we come to this? So Stephanie, why don't we start with you?
Great, thanks very much. I think the question of where we are and what the problem is, the main problem is that it's not clear cut what the answer is, who has responsibility for this. This isn't really something that either the government or the companies or the civil society sector can solve on their own. We all know about the information operation campaign in the U.S. election in 2016. And that was, when the president says this wasn't Russia trying to support me, in a sense he's right. This was more about trying to create confusion, create chaos, and undermine faith in the institutions and in democracy in general. So we've seen that used in other elections that have happened since then. But more importantly is we've seen this happen outside of election periods. Just a couple months ago, the security agency or security contractor found that there were hundreds of social media accounts on Facebook and Twitter that were created by both Russian organizations and also Iranian operations. And they were set up years before the 2016 election, and continued right through up until even a few months ago. So we know that this isn't necessarily about trying to get people elected. It's about undermining faith in institutions. It's about confusing the population by giving them contradictory information. It's about drowning out legitimate journalism, legitimate reporting. So it's not that there's one specific objective, and it's not that there's one specific message. It's fragmented, and that if you had one message, it'd be easier to counter. So I'm not going to get too much into the solutions because I know we're going to talk about that later, but there are a few of the governments that have had elections since 2016 have tried several different things. I think Sweden presents a really interesting model because they looked at not just creating a main working group basically of different agencies that came together because your security agencies and your intelligence agencies, your foreign affairs agencies, they all have different perspectives on this and making sure that everybody's on the same page. It is important to get the tech sector involved, but we can talk more about that later. But I think a big thing that's overlooked is public education. And this is something that applies equally to Western countries that have far more experience with social media and with the internet. People who are more used to navigating digital technologies. And it also applies to countries that are maybe coming online for the first time in the last few years. So it's not even about, part of it is about digital literacy, and part of it is just media literacy in general. It's not like it was even 10, 15 years ago where there was, the New York Times, the Washington Post, your BBC, everybody knew what their main sources of information were, and everyone was kind of on the same page. You might not agree with a political party, but there wasn't this sort of fundamental disagreement with the truth that we've seen. So when people are getting their information from a million different places, it's harder to filter out, and this is something that the people who are launching influence operations, they're very aware of. So I think a big part of it is trying to get more public education. Both short term, if you're aware of an attack that's taking place, to be able to get out in front of it, give people as much information as you can. as far as security and foreign policy allows, just to give people the heads up and to encourage them to think a little more critically. And then there's a longer term of trying to make sure that people learn how to think critically about the news, which is, I think, something that's been lost in the last few years. To learn what the what methods are used, learn how to think critically about news sources, and think critically about different ways that messages are trying to get across. And I know this seems like this isn't something that's going to be done overnight. It seems a little, frankly, idealistic when we're living in a time when the Flat Earth Society is able to actually get new recruits. I mean, if you can't convince people that the Earth is round, it's hard to convince people that...
It is?
I'm sorry, I know that's confusing for you. But no, this is just it. You're not going to reach everybody. But that's no reason not to try. We've seen from the world of public health that it took a long time, but people have learned that smoking is bad. People have learned that you need to put on your seatbelt if you're riding in a car. So it's no reason not to start this just because you're not going to get everybody right away.
Great, thank you, Benjamin.
Thanks,
From the
Jim.
Singaporean perspective. And global.
And speaking of which, we just came out of a parliamentary select committee process and the report was published. And one of the great things that came out of the process was that a lot of different people with different perspectives came about. So I would say there's no one single problem in this. And the one single problem is that there is no one single problem. Because if you look at it, if you come from it as a legislator, your solution is to pass legislation. If you're coming in from a tech angle, your solution is throw more tech at it. If you're a journalist, you want to form a fact-checking group, and if you basically pick and choose. But the whole problem is multi-pronged. Influence operations isn't just tech. It isn't just social media, fake news. It's a whole host of things. There are psychological aspects to it, how you work on people's cognitive biases, there's an economic part to it, how business people are being put under pressure because of trade issues or because of their businesses being infiltrated or even blackmail. It's so complex that we really need a strategic overview of this. And that, I think, comes to the question you're going to ask later about who's going to look into this, because somebody needs that big picture helicopter view. And as long as we leave this in the hands of only the tech companies to solve it, a tech view, or only legislators to solve it with legislation, we're not going to be able to address the whole issue of influence, because influence is everywhere. And I think we are familiar with that fable of 5 blind men touching an elephant. Depending on which end of the elephant you touch, you think an elephant is either a rope or a wall or a sheet. And actually, it's all of the above. And somebody with sight, has to tell everyone that we got to work together and not leave out the individuals, because individual agency is also an important thing. To the individual person to be able to say, I can take a stand against influence when I see it and call it out. Then as a whole of society, that's the only way we're going to be able to address this.
Great, thank you. In the preliminary discussions we had, we all decided that it would be best if we let Reema talk for the whole hour, but she declined. But Reema, please.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to start with a story about how a drummer debunked fake news. I work as a district police chief of one of the remotest rural districts in the state of Telengana. We had first-hand experience of this issue in the month of March, when I just took over as the district police chief of Joglamba Gadwal district. So wherever I worked, I used to implement a system called the village police officers. The idea was to allot villages to every constable officer who works in a police station and use their influence in the jurisdiction to reach out to the community to address the huge trust gap that exists between communities and police in India. So after implementing the system, I was holding my very first review with these village police officers on 27th March. We were talking about the different issues, political, social, crime, law and order. And one of my constables, he stood up and he said, ma'am, I observed something very unusual in all the villages that I visited in the last 1 week. And he went on to say that he visited 25 villages and he saw that people were not sleeping outside their houses. So I'm talking about a region which is economically backward. People have small houses. Most of the houses are single-roomed houses, sometimes two-roomed. And the size of the family is huge. On an average, every family has 6 to 7 members. To see them sleeping out inside their houses in the sweltering heat of March was something unusual, and we really wanted to know what was going wrong. So I told my officers to go back and come back with a report in the next 48 hours. 489 of my officers went back to 400 odd villages. They did a thorough inquiry about what was happening on ground, and they all came up with a bunch of videos, images and voice messages. And they came back and told me that these videos were giving sleepless nights to the people living in those villages. And that was news to me because I didn't know that people had access to smartphones and they were using internet. Because the region that I worked, if you look at the literacy rate, it is 48%, less than 50%. And most of the households don't have basic minimum facilities. And to learn that people had access to internet and they were all using smartphones and they were using WhatsApp, and every village had at least 30 to 45 WhatsApp groups was really something. It was an eye-opener for us and it was a red flag. So we collected all these videos and I called my IT core team, the information technology team that I have. It's a group of police officers who are tech savvy, and we examined each image. We went through each video. And some of the videos were very graphic. I would like to give an example about one particular video which was forcing these villagers to have a self-imposed curfew. They were not stepping out of their houses after 6 in the evening. They were not allowing their children to step out in the evening. And the women were not allowed to travel. They were not allowed to travel alone. And most of the villages formed themselves into vigilante groups, and they were resorting to patrolling in the area. And the number of police officers that I have in my team are limited, so we couldn't really go out to intensify the patrolling activities. So in spite of giving public announcements through the local media, people didn't want to really believe us in the first phase when we launched this campaign. So when we were examining this video, we came to know that most of the images were morphed. For example, there was this picture of which had dead bodies of children on ground, and a guy is sitting and he's dismembering their limbs. Their organs are being pulled out. And there was another video which had the visuals of 5 people, and one guy is he's struggling to stay alive, and he's pleading for his life. 4 guys are standing around in a circle, and one of them puts his hand inside his body, which is already cut open, and he's pulling his organs one after another. And this man is screaming. It was a 2.5-minute video, and this was going viral. So people saw these videos and they thought there was an interstate criminal gang out there which is there to harvest organs. Exactly 15 days later, we read about the very first lynching incident in the state of Telengana in a place called Bhimgal, where a tribal man was lynched in his own village because some of them could not recognize him. They thought he was a stranger, and he went there to kidnap their children, to lift their children. Right after that incident, there were too many images and videos of child lifting gangs started doing rounds in the district. And in India, particularly in this region, children are an asset. Like if somebody loses a spouse, it doesn't really evoke a very strong reaction, but when they lose a kid, it does lead to a lot of emotions, and people didn't want their children to go out. And most of the villages were engaging in mob activities. And this was around March, April. The local festivals were going on. People were traveling across the borders. Anybody who walks into the village who is a stranger, who is not being recognized, was restrained, and they were locked up in the Grama Panchayat buildings, the village council buildings. And over a period of 45 days, we had at least 23 incidents which had the potential to turn into lynching. So in the first week of April, when I realized that this had the potential to turn into something bigger, something dangerous, and more risky for us, I called for an urgent training workshop for my police officers. We showed these videos to them. We taught them how to differentiate between a real and fake video, a real and fake image. And we sent these police officers out to the communities. So in the first phase, we literally did a door-to-door campaign where every household, almost 1.5 million people who live in my jurisdiction, were reached out to, and we went and we appealed to them not to believe in these rumors, not to take law into their hands, not to kill people, not to attack strangers. For about 2 weeks we did this, and we started reading about lynching incidents happening elsewhere in the country, and people started circulating those videos where people are being lynched, saying that, see, the guy was a child lifter, that's why people didn't have a choice but to lynch him to death. So in the second phase, what we did was to take the help of the local stakeholders. So we organized a training session for the village council elders, the local representatives, and we taught them how to spot fake news and misinformation. We took their help, and in one of the training sessions, a village council elder stood up and he told me, ma'am, I have a suggestion for you. In every village, there are 30 to 40 WhatsApp groups, and invariably in all the groups, I'm the admin. So why don't you ask your police officers to be part of these groups? So whenever there is a fake video or a fake image being circulated, at least he will know. So he can warn the people not to circulate them, not to make them go viral, and also request the admin to take it down. So we did that. And in the second phase, all the local drummers were called, even in India. This is a classic case of how we used ancient communication methods to fight a challenge which was thrown to us by modern technology. So we roped in all these drummers. A drummer is typically a town crier. His job is to go to a village if he has to communicate a message to the people. He goes to the village, he'd start beating the drum, people gather around him, and the message is conveyed. Sometimes the message is about a funeral, about a wedding, or about some government welfare scheme, or if some important leader is visiting the village. So we gathered them, we trained them to give a message in 1 minute. So they were taught to say to the people that, look, police have come to a village and they are appealing to us not to circulate these messages, not to believe in them, and not to take law into their hands. And in the second phase, I have a police cultural troupe, a group of police officers who can sing and dance. So we sat together one day. We thought this issue was beyond our ability to control, because we were looking at an issue where there's no way we could go after the source of these messages. I did try for some time. We really wanted to go to the source so that we can stop it right there, so that it doesn't go viral and it doesn't instigate people to kill each other. But we failed. I'm sure all of us are aware about the end-to-end encryption feature which is there in WhatsApp, which makes it difficulty for us to deal with the traceability question. So we couldn't do that. So the only option that we were left with was to go to people, reach out to everyone, and teach them about it. So we are talking about a population which is not literate and which is also not digitally literate. So I would like to take that point which was raised by Stephanie, digital literacy. So even though we were police officers, it is not part of my basic job. We did this apart from the core mandate of our work. After doing our regular work, we used to go to all these villages, took the folk team with us. We sat and we wrote 3 songs on fake news in the local dialect. And we practiced those songs. My team practiced some dance, and they came up with some ballet and street plays, and they went to every village, 400 villages in 2 districts. And every person was taught not to circulate, not to believe in them, and not to attack anybody. So that helped us. It took almost 45 days, a lot of work, a lot of intensive campaign through media, through social media, and we did try sending out some positive messages through the local digital platforms, but it didn't really work. I was just reading a recent report about MIT, which speaks about how people tend, I think the cognitive bias point which was raised by my friend here, I think people are cognitively inclined to believe more in falsehood than truth. So that was also another reason that we were fighting on ground, that in spite of us telling the people not to circulate them, not to make them viral, they still were doing it. But thanks to the campaign, after almost 3 months, even though we had 23 different incidents, criminal cases were booked, people were sent to jail, even juveniles were engaging in these kind of activities, but we could prevent deaths. Nobody got killed in both the districts that I was holding charge of.
Great. Thank you, Reema. That was good.
Thank you.
Marek, that's going to be a tough act to follow.
Yes. Thank you, Jim. I think it's worth to mention that this issue of disinformation and foreign influencing is very good illustration of the contemporary dilemma that we are facing. That on one hand, digital revolution and the widespread of the ICT technologies offer new and easy ways, especially through social media, to disseminate, to exchange information on a large, unprecedented scale in history, and also with almost instant speed and precision. But they can also be used as very powerful echo chambers for disinformation campaigns. And why it is so important, and why, from European perspective, because this is what I would like to present here, why we have to tackle this issue. Because this is, on one hand, it was perceived this way initially, especially since Russian hybrid operations against Ukraine 4 years ago. It was perceived as a part of the broader hybrid warfare strategy, so security issue. But after the experience of recent years, we realized that this is also a kind of fundamental challenge to our democratic system, because disinformation, hostile propaganda, foreign influencing, they erode trust in institutions, democratic institutions, trust in digital and traditional media. They also harm our democracies because they hamper the ability of citizens to actually take independent decisions and express their views. So usually those operations, their goal is to polarize societies. So create tensions, polarize debates, but also in the long term undermine the trust and participation in the democratic processes. So this is a kind of challenge that might in the long term lead to the erosion of the participatory democracy. And I think we also realized that we have to, on one hand, protect very important values, freedoms, like freedom of expression, freedom of media. But on the other hand, it is to a certain extent the responsibility of authorities, state authorities, to inform citizens and protect them against those activities that aimed at deliberately manipulating their views and deliberately, covertly trying to influence their decisions, political decisions. And those operations, they became a kind of daily experience in our democratic processes. So we see increasing a pace of those operations in last few years, and they are, so to say, a kind of risk factor when we are trying to build the resilience of our societies and our democratic systems. We can name a few examples of electoral campaigns before presidential elections in United States, in France, before referendum in the Netherlands, referendum on the association agreement between EU and Ukraine. And in all those cases, we experience very powerful attempts to change, to sway the public opinion. And we can also try to identify the main categories of those operations. On one hand, we have operations directed against electoral infrastructure. So they can take form of cyber attacks that try to distort the voting process or process of counting votes. But even more important, I think, is the second category, namely the attempts to manipulate the behavior of voters. And here we know from the recent experience that it can take also different forms. I will mention three of them. First, hacks and leaks designed to change public opinion by revealing damaging information, especially at the crucial point during electoral campaign. Second, use of fake news to sway public opinion and influence the results. So fake news created specifically for targeted audience. And the third example, third form, is the misuse of targeted messaging based especially on psychometrics and data mining. So Cambridge Analytica case is very good illustration of this. And in conclusion, I think that we have to be aware that the exposure of citizens to this large-scale disinformation operations, including spreading misleading or false information, is a major and long-lasting challenge for our democratic societies. So it's not enough to identify the scale of the problem, but we have to take actions. And if time permits, I will try during the Q&A session to mention few of the actions and tools that especially European Union, NATO, and individual states in Europe are trying to apply in this context.
Yeah, in the preparation, Marek said that he had frontline experience with
exactly.
this. So
from Poland, we are on the front line.
So hopefully we'll get a chance to come back to that. But Morteza, you had slides, is that correct? Or you had a presentation?
No, there is a website. Maybe I would just ask to show it later.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well, and we'll provide the website for people for your presentation, which is quite good. But if you could go ahead then, please.
So, thank you, Jim, and hi, everyone. So, I want to start with kind of this question that what is the problem, and what is the problem currently regarding these big data topics and this information problem. And I want to just shed light from a different aspect on this topic. I mean, we have heard a lot about this topic in media and in political side of the story, but I just want to shed kind of light on a different side of the story. And there are two main topics, two major problems that people are tackling these days. One is the topic of fake news, and the other is the topic of external intervention in the elections in different countries and in different kind of periods of time during last 10 years. And what I want to say is last 2 years, I was I'm not originally a politician, and I'm not into politics, political science. I'm more kind of a economist and then mathematician and more than engineer at the end. So my point of view is this kind of, my extreme kind of point of view is this fight against fake news is being led by fake news somehow. And just to give you some samples, some scientific facts, we have the topic of fake news in US and in Germany, two topics that I'm I have information about. And we had the kind of elections in US, and then at the end everyone in media was kind of blaming fake news, and the fake news kind of changed the elections, and it was kind of manipulating the elections. But then we had the study from researchers at Harvard University that out of the 100 kind of most shared links and news in Facebook, only 2 of them were kind of fake news, not directly even fake news, but false information. So it's less than 2% or maybe 2% of the kind of big part of like this information flow was kind of tagged as false information. And we did the same study in Germany and before the elections, and this value kind of decreases to 0%, like to 0. So like out of like 100 most shared news on Twitter, the kind of 0 of them were kind of fake news or false information. And this was the first part of the story about the fake news, and we have the topic about the public, about the foreign kind of intervention to the elections. And again, we have the facts that like before the elections in US, Hillary Clinton and Trump, they just spent like $81 million on like online ads on Facebook. But in comparison, this whole topic is like, this whole kind of discussion these days is about Russia, and Russia like this kind of internet research foundation from Russia, they spent like $41,000. So compare the numbers, 81 million comparing to $41,000 like on ads. So the effect is really small, and even on this study like by researchers at Harvard University, they just came to the point that it's not easy to show like if this kind of $41,000 like dollar was influential, but based on their findings, it didn't really change the public opinion in any sense. They didn't find any clues. They didn't tell that it never happened, but they didn't find any clues that this $41,000 from this foundation in Russia, it was kind of changing or manipulating the public opinion. And their finding was like it's like the society is already polarized. So the problem is not this social media and big data and this huge flow of information, but the problem is more in the education and in the like society part. And to me, like my personal opinion is like what is happening now is like there is a huge problem in many societies. Like in some societies it's like larger, in some it's smaller. And this problem, because governments are not able to kind of handle this problem, they are trying to kind of remove the problem by controlling the social media. And then like as sample, we had this Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, like this NetDG regulation in Germany, which was trying to kind of control like the flow of like falsehood and like fake information on Facebook. And it's interesting that many countries like Singapore, Malaysia, I have a list, I don't know if I can find it because my notes are all mixed. Like Singapore, Philippines, Russia, Venezuela, Kenya, UK, and like Malaysia, they are kind of citing this kind of regulations in Germany, NetDG, to kind of justify the need of regulation in their countries. But no one mentions that out of like the 5-6 political parties in the parliament, like in Germany, 4 of them were against this regulation. Or no one mentions that there are like a lot of research that they think that this regulation is against this UDHR and ICCPR regulations, which are like, they have clear rules for for freedom of expression. And there are like a lot of researchers from like, from third-party organizations and even experts that they are claiming this NetDG is against this UDHR, Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But the question is like, no one in Singapore probably is mentioning, like when they are, because they know what they want, so they are not mentioning this, or in other countries. And the other point I wanted to mention is like, okay, we have this issue. I don't want to tell there is no problems. There are problems, and there is need for regulation. But the point is like, we can't act based on the kind of discussions on the media and discussions of the politicians alone. We should just kind of try to understand the problem by scientific research and by really kind of understanding the problem. So that's why me personally, after doing research like 5-6 years like on this social media, I think like the solution is first monitoring the social media like in different countries and to trying to understand if there is real influence or real pressure from like external forces on this topic. and then to kind of to see if this kind of external forces are influential. So that's why, like in our research group in Germany, Technical University of Munich, we started this kind of service which we are trying to monitor kind of the social media in like the politics part of social media in Germany, like to monitor to see what is happening. And this was like a small effort in our group, and I'm pretty sure, like my opinion is like, I mean, if you can show the website, my opinion is like, if you want to kind of solve this problem, the government should just kind of catch the speed of, like, I don't know, they should catch up the speed of like innovation in the industry, and they should try to monitor this system and try to understand, and to use the same system to control this fake news, but not to remove the problem by making like rules and regulations and by putting force like on putting pressure on the freedom of speech. And I mean, I wish you could see the website to see how the system works, but that was my point for now.
Great, we'll come back to that though. I told the group that we would talk about what the responsibilities are for companies, citizens, and governments. But before we do that, I want to encourage you, if you have questions, now's a good time to come up to the microphones on the side. This is your big chance. Standing in the back is Sean Canuck, the real moderator of this panel. Want to wave, Sean? Sean violated all known Indian traffic laws to get here. And I promised him he would have the first question. He said he would give a long speech in response. So Sean, do you have a question you wanted to ask the panel? We'll start with you.
I'm going to cede my time to this gentleman right here.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead, please.
Thanks, everyone, for a really enlightening panel. I wanted to pick up on something that Benjamin started to talk about, and it was the parable of the elephant and the 5 blind men. The thing that I find interesting about that story is that it ends up in 2 potential directions, right? One direction is that the 5 blind men end up coming to blows and getting into a fight because they disagree.
Yes.
Another way the story ends up is that the 5 blind men collaborate on trying to understand what they're looking at.
Yes.
And that's the fun part of the story, is that it could end up in both directions.
Yes.
That's also the interesting part about influence activities. These are things that have been happening for a very long time, for generations. The internet is just the most contemporary form of what we see as influence activities. And so the tension is that, on the one hand, states and actors leverage these capabilities to produce outcomes to advance their interests. And in doing so, have created a system where many actors can produce interests to advance their own objectives. And if that's true, then what I'd like to understand is, who are the coalition of willing that are willing to sacrifice the objectives that they might have at influencing populations domestically or abroad? Domestically, we call it message testing in the form of political campaigns, but it's really the same thing, in order to produce a higher value outcome, which is a more literate society that is able to debunk fake information, be able to assess critically the content that they're seeing in order to produce more empowered citizens. So who's part of that coalition of the willing?
Maybe we can ask Stephanie to respond to that question first, and then if others have.
No, I think that's an excellent question. We are, even by having events like this, I think we're starting to talk about that. We're starting to form these coalitions. And we've seen a lot of governments that are trying to take this on, sometimes, as Morteza mentioned, in ways that are more aimed at content regulation, and sometimes more building partnerships with tech industry. And we've even seen the tech companies in the last few years, I think because they realized that after the US election, they got absolutely dragged through the mud, and their shareholders didn't like it. So groups like Facebook and Twitter and Google have introduced new laws around election transparency, and making it harder for just anybody to buy ads unless they live in the country. So we are seeing people take some steps. I think a big part of this is research. And this is an opportunity, hopefully, for the social media giants to partner with with academics, with civil society groups who have a better understanding of the local context and the countries where this is happening. And traditionally, they've been very protective of their information, but they're better positioned than anyone else to understand what messages spread and what picks up steam. So I think we're again, we are seeing, Facebook, I know, has reached out to researchers and to universities, and they're trying to do more research around this. I think that's something we should definitely encourage. And again, I think there's more awareness of this, and hopefully we can start building those coalitions.
Before I turn to the others, let me do an editorial here, which is that one thing we should remember is that democracy is messy, and particularly in the US and India, I'd say they're two of the messiest democracies. We have to have a little faith in that. This is a process. The snapshot right now is of undue influence, of influence operations. But one thing we could think about as you respond is over time societies will adjust, people will adjust. We have a belief that freedom of expression leads to the right outcome, but the process of that freedom can be very messy. And is that what we're in now? I mean, when you think about responding to the question, I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on this answer.
I think it's a great question.
Bearing in mind that we have...
I think it's, so I'll very short answer. It's a very great question who that coalition of the willing will be. And it might vary from, and probably will vary from country to country and society to society, because the power dynamic is different between government and tech companies. The amount of influence that India can have on a tech company is very different from what a smaller Asian country could have. And also the relationship with the population, whether they can actually build trust like the police were able to do in the villages. It's a totally different relationship between law enforcement. So that's a whole lot of dynamics, but so long as every society and nation has that willingness to try and find that solution together instead of coming to blows, like you said, that's the only way we're going to be able to do it.
Others? Quickly? No? Reema?
At the heart of the current debate, we have to look at 4 issues. One is privacy, I think somebody pointed that out, and second, culpability, which is for the law enforcement to deal with, liability, and digital literacy. So when we are looking at solutions, all these 4 issues have to be addressed holistically, and the framework has to take into consideration all these 4. If I have to take the example of WhatsApp, for example, which became a law enforcement issue for us, some of a section of the society started arguing that it is not a platform issue, it's a social issue. I'd like to argue that yes, it is a social issue, it is a law enforcement issue, and it is also a platform issue. So the framework definitely has to take into consideration all these.
Great, thank you. Why don't we get a question from that side of the room? Is there one over there? No?
Thank you. I'm Giselle Yitamben from Cameroon. And after listening to Rema from her example and now on, my question is the rising sense of insecurity really technology-driven, or does the enhanced use of technology make human beings more aware of their insecurities in our world? And if that's the case, I believe that those panels should have strong space for these questions of humans. Thank you.
Great question. Marek, do you want to take a first crack at it?
Yes, I think here we can have or talk about 2 layers, at least from the perspective of foreign influencing operations. One is the attempt to influence the decision-making process, to create confusion about the facts, to distort the facts, and also an attempt to paralyze the decision-making process either domestically in one particular country or even in the case of some organizations, international organizations like NATO or EU. The second, I would say, deeper layer is the direct attempt to produce the expected or recommended result of certain democratic processes that are happening in a specific country, or in case of European Union, for example, upcoming European elections, they will take place in May next year. So usually in this case, the foreign actor is trying to support those political forces that represent a similar agenda, international agenda, or those forces that are located on the extreme ends, so to say, of political spectrum. Let's say either far right, far left, but those that provide more radical platform. And here I think we also see from the European experience that actually those values that are central for our system, for that we call European values, but I think they are more universal, like freedom of expression, freedom of speech, democratic representative system. They are perceived by some of our adversaries as our vulnerabilities that could be potentially exploited from the even foreign policy point of view, or from the point of view of long-term strategy. And here I think the answers could be very different. We can tackle this issue from different angles. Kind of natural response would be to support education, media literacy, especially among younger generation, but also to support quality journalism, work with the media, and create also certain diversity and pluralism among the media, in the media world. Another issue is to improve transparency, especially with regard to the political advertisements. And here the production and sponsoring of information should be more transparent. We should also try to improve the credibility of informations and ensure the broader involvement of many stakeholders, like industry, representatives of online platforms, leading social networks, advertisement industry. And here I think that the most promising way, in my opinion, is the kind of self-regulation. So code of conducts, code of practices, because it's very difficult to impose something on in this area. So I think kind of wide range of commitments, something that in the European Union we managed to agree in September this year, wide range of commitments from transparency in political advertising through even the closure of fake accounts and ending in depriving actually those suppliers of fake news from their profits. So there is wide range of issues, but we should also try to use institutional solutions. So create a kind of tools or instruments to respond to those fake news and to present not distorted reality. So Stratcom units that will be able actually to respond, but also to provide a kind of long-term information strategy. I stop here.
Good. In the interest of time, why don't we do three things actually. We'll take two sets of questions at a time. Could I ask the questioners to keep their remarks actual questions and relatively short? And we up here will try and match you by being concise in our answers. So why don't we start over here, and then we'll go to that side, so we'll take 2 questions at a time.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Yoko Nita from Tokyo, Japan. My question towards my Polish ambassador colleague. I'm a security advisor to Japanese government on the national level. So, Russia is very much close to Japan geopolitically and geographically, of course. And I'm a chair of the Russian working group, so I am information analyst and been analyzing their sort of information security approach. Of course, hybrid warfare, reflexive control, subversion kind of thing. So, can you a little bit elaborate, you government, how to deal with their hybrid warfare approach? Like social media, this issue should be controlled by government. So, how have you handled that? Thank you so much.
Okay, question from the other side, please.
Hello, my name is Max. I'm running the biggest digital transformation agency in Southeast Asia, so I'm really on the front line. First of all, Reema, excellent work that you're doing. I was really blown away from your stories. So the first question is to you. Have you thought about to fight your enemy with his own weapons? So what I mean by that, because you said you reach out to everyone, but have you thought about what's the scalability of content? So why don't you create content in terms of like infotainment, which is educational, but still, interesting, like for this target audience, and you distribute it across all the WhatsApp groups, because then you don't have to be physically there. To this is also, have you thought about to create a central regional WhatsApp group that you say there's the central police line, post the content there and we can verify it or not, that you have like really the role of the police in the digital world. So this is directed to you, to the whole audience, and here thanks Morteza for your insights. We also run businesses in Malaysia, and before the election there was this great law, fake news law, so any information that was not approved by the government was deemed fake news. Obviously the goal was to quiet an opposition and no one challenges the government. In fact, it completely backfired. Najib and his one MDB saga, I think everyone of us knows what happens to it. So my question is now to everyone, I would like to know your point of view. Don't you think it's the same situation, but with the new medium? So it's a weapon of mass communication? Because in fact, that what has been highlighted, that it's manipulation of behavior of voters, use of fake news, misuse of target messages. I mean, this has been done all the way in politics. If you look at Nixon and the Vietnam War, I mean, this is like the gold standard. So my question is to you, is it just not the same situation, but with the new medium?
So let's, again, in the interest of time, those 2 questions were targeted at Marek and Reema, but there's 2 final questions. Let's go ahead and have you ask as well. So if we can start on this side and then do that side.
Hello, this is Reema here, University of Delhi research student. Reema, Rajeshwari, I'm deeply inspired the work you have done there. My question is directed to you. Recently in Rajasthan government, the district magistrate had to do internet shutdown because of the SSC paper leak. And on the other hand, in UP, DM had to shut down internet because of a potential riot taking place because of a video. So there is this thing that companies are facing $1 million losses because of that shutdown, but the bureaucrats have to deal with the issue, taking the human lives at the priority, not the profits. So how the bureaucrats are dealing with this dilemma and dealing with the companies in this conflict between the profit and the human lives, and the right situations or maybe societal harmony getting hampered because of the messages being spread, and the videos spread and fake news and all that. So your take on that. Thank you.
Okay, and then the final question over on this side.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tripti Jain from Software Freedom Law Center, India. And my question is something similar to the lady just iterated. We maintain a internet shutdown tracker and track shutdowns across the nation. And it is a very big problem in India. We have seen 251 shutdowns till date from 2012. I just want to understand from Reema, did you consider ever shutting down the internet while you were facing all of these issues in your district? 1. And if you did not, what did you think when all of these things were happening? 2, if we really consider that internet shutdowns is a solution, then what are those situations when we need to have shutdowns? Because in India, we are having shutdowns for frivolous reasons like preventing cheating in examinations. So what should be those situations when we should actually consider shutting down the internet? Thank you.
Let's save Reema for last. I want to go down the row, starting with Morteza. Everyone else, please answer as many questions as you can.
So I would just put like short comments. So like the question that one of the guys here asked, I mean, I believe in, like, we have had, like, it's a fact that we have had like many technological disruptions over the history in communication. We had the newspapers, then we needed like trained journalists. We had the TV, then we need rules to kind of control the TV. And to me, like, social media and Facebook is exactly the same kind of topic, and we need to learn how to deal with it, how to control it. I mean, to me, social media is like kind of projecting undermined parts of the society. To me, social media is not kind of, making problems. It's showing the governments that there is a part of people who are undermined. They need to be taken care of. This is the first thing. And the other thing is like one of the colleagues here mentioned, like this fact of like distorted reality. Like, this is exactly freedom of speech. Like, humans, single citizens, they are allowed to have like distorted reality in their mind. They are allowed to talk about it. As I was allowed like 20 years ago to take my phone, call my dad, and just talk about like distorted reality or whatever, this is the same on Facebook now. I'm allowed to do this. I accept that Facebook Facebook initially was created to share pictures of cats and dogs. It wasn't really made for political discussion. I agree on that point. But still, it doesn't take the right of people to have this kind of distorted points of view. This is exactly what is like in this Universal Declaration of Human Rights, that humans are allowed to have distorted kind of reality. Humans are allowed to have wrong opinions. It's okay. But then the problem is, like, we have to learn how to deal with the social media and this huge flow of information. And yeah, that is it. I don't want to take more time. So
I think that's a crucial point, though, is that some of this is something we have to accept. But we have 3 minutes and 52 seconds left, okay. So if everyone else could. Leaving some time for Reema at the end.
Good. Thank you very much. I'll try to answer, quoting also the topic of this panel, war by other means. So what is the essence actually of the problem is that the weaponization of information. Yes, that the information became kind of modern weapon in a kind of undeclared, ongoing war that is not reaching the threshold of open confrontation or open conflict, but is trying to weaken the adversary, its ability to defend itself. And we have in NATO, in EU, a lot of experience with those issues, even from the Cold War time. Been confronted with Soviet tactics of psychological warfare or active measures. Today, the target of those Russian influencing operations is the unity of European Union, cohesion of the NATO alliance, and also kind of internal cohesion of the societies. And what is the kind of best answer to those operations? I think that there are three elements here in the potential strategy. Yes, first is detection. So based on monitoring of the media, stemming either from a national level or from the level of organizations that I mentioned. In case of NATO, we have NATO Center of Excellence on Strategic Communication located in Riga, created 4 years ago, and we have also joint NATO-EU Center of Excellence on Countering Hybrid Threats located in Finland, in Helsinki, where I have the pleasure to sit on the steering board. Okay. Then analysis. So analysis of the content and origin of those malicious activities. And third element, response. So response by confronting the disinformation campaigns with objective facts, objective facts and ensuring that those facts will reach the proper audience. So for example, good tool in case of European Union is so-called Stratcom Task Force East, created in the External Action Service, that deals actually with responses to the false facts presented usually by Russia. So those are the elements of the kind of strategy to respond to those information campaigns.
So Ben and Stephanie, maybe you could quickly...
Super fast. 3 points based on a legal concept to answer your question, that universal human rights should be accompanied with universal human responsibility. 3 things. Tech companies need to take responsibility for the content, just like other companies and industries have had to take responsibility for toxic waste and harm. Number 2, citizens need to take responsibility for the crap that they share. And thirdly, that governments need to take responsibility for the social issues, whatever it is, economic inequality, and don't give people the material to spread something bad.
Stephanie.
All right. Building on that very quickly, the idea of companies having responsibility, absolutely, but we also need to make it help them, make it easy for people to be able to judge for themselves. So that things like public education are important, because if people are educated and have that digital media literacy, you're building resilience in the population, and you're not relying on either the government or the companies to make decisions on what's real, what's fake, what's permissible, what's not, and some very tricky, messy issues that I don't necessarily want tech companies weighing in on. But there are ways that you can help improve transparency. A lot of people have talked about labeling bots as bots on different services, so you know if you're reading something that's from a genuine person or from a machine that's pumping things out. More transparency around content of political advertising. So there are things that you can do to sort of help people while we're in the process of getting to the point where we're building literacy in the public, and it still protects freedom of information.
So the example I usually use is Gutenberg brought the movable type to Europe, and the result of this increased ability to communicate and share information was hundreds of years of warfare. So hopefully we can accelerate the process here, but we have new ways of communicating and sharing, and I think democracies will have to adjust. But I told you at the beginning that we could have given the whole hour to Reema. Reema, you got the last word, and I see the organizers over there looking angrily at me because the lunch is getting cold. So please, Reema.
I'll be very quick. I had 2 questions, and the first one was about how about police officers get into the business of creating credible content and have probably a centralized WhatsApp group, and you use that space to disseminate the right kind of information. Yes, we are working on it. Some of the digital platforms have reached out to us, and they came up with a request that we should help them in creating these credible content. So whenever there is a spate of incidents like this, we can jump into action and we can make sure that the malicious content is taken down and credible content is pushed into the system. We are working on that, and at a much personal level, the next phase of my campaign is going to focus on students, especially the ones who are studying in high school and colleges. We are going to use them as information warriors. We are going to teach them how to spot fake news and how to create awareness within the community they live in. The second question, a pretty serious one, came from 2 people, and it was on internet shutdown. One of them asked how the bureaucrats, we are dealing with it, and do I support internet shutdown? I'm sure you're aware of the fact that law and order is a state subject in India. So sometimes the concerned stakeholders, officers on ground, have to take some tough decisions based on the local conditions, depending on the seriousness of the issue. So I wouldn't like to comment on that, and I wouldn't say that they made a wrong decision. But personally, my opinion is that I am not for blanket ban, and I'm going to give a very technical answer. This is not for me as a cop to give this answer, but yes, we've been studying about it. I've been studying about this. So my answer to the question is that the digital platforms and the tech companies have to come together, and they have to work on this issue called geofencing of trouble areas. For example, if one particular area is having this trouble of dealing with malicious content leading to violence, we should rather focus on that particular area, and we need to focus on pocket level planning. And I was told by a team of tech executives that we can have this option of focusing on the session initiation protocol, where you can play a vital role in enabling identifying potential areas, and those areas can be geofenced so that you don't have to resort to blanket ban. And my closing remark on the issue is that fighting a social media monster is a collective social responsibility, and all of us have to come together and fight this. Thank you.
Okay, well, with that, I think we